Welcome back to the Fullstack JavaScript tutorials where we explore the project. In this video, I want to show you how to use TDD with a core Node.js module called Assert. Assert is very basic. There are other NPM modules, but it's good to know how to use it because the basics are the same. So we start with some imports. Obviously, we need assert. We also export HTTP. And then the most important thing here is that we import the server object, the server file. So in the previous Hello World example, we used server.js. In this example, our file is MB server. I will show it to you later. For now, we are using test-driven development, so we start with tests. So what we want to get the messages and we want to have the list. So this is how our message board will function. We get the list of messages, right? And let's pretend that we already have some value there, okay? We'll just hard code it somewhere because it's a memory store. There is no database. And then we want to also be able to add messages, okay? So two functions, get messages, add messages, and then once we added the message, we want to make sure that message is in fact in the database, quote unquote, right? It's stored somewhere. It's not a real database, but we will need to see the results, right? So we are invoking get messages again, and then we're comparing the results against our first value, which is John High, and the second value, which is Jake Go. Probably not the most creative messages, but let's keep it simple, stupid for now. And then we implement our MB server. MB stands for message board. So we start with importations again. As you might notice, the first lines in Node.js files are always module imports. We import util, which is another core module, same as HTTP. No need to install anything with npm in this example. Util has some utility functions. We'll be using some parsing functions from that module, and the query string, we will be using that to parse the URL encoded data. Then the port, you already know, it's a fallback, so we smartly can differentiate between when we have this environmental variable or when we don't have it. We just use the hard-coded value, which is what we will be using for our local setup. And the env we'll be using for the cloud. Now, this is our fake database. It's just an array. That's right, just a simple JavaScript array, messages equal square braces, nothing fancy. And then we push some data. It's going to be our seed data, just for testing purposes. Now, this is a very important piece. What we're doing here, we're exporting the server. We use an export.server. This tells Node.js when you require this file, what will be available. Without exports, this thing here in test.js would not be available for us. Okay? And inside of the request handler for the server, we have this big if condition. So what it does? Basically, we need to differentiate when it's a post, when it's get, when it's some other request, right? Because in a RESTful API, we have different HTTP verbs, we have different URLs. So the first condition, we check that it's a post, and then we check the URL that it's /messages/create.json. Then that means basically that we need to add this message. We need to get the data and add the message. The way we're adding the data, we have this rec.on event listener. So basically it means request on data. So when there is a data on the request object, we go ahead and parse it and put it into add messages. The data comes in the data argument. You can name it any way you want. The most important thing is that it's the first argument in this callback. And then when it's over, we actually want to output this message back Usually it's good when you're posting something to output that back. You want to see some newly created properties, maybe underscore ID or timestamps. And this is where we're using util inspect. This is just a nice way of console logging. Util.expect is the name of the method. And you can see res.send, we're sending this message back. You can also check that your message was parsed and interpreted correctly by the server. If you're submitting hi John, but you're getting some different message, some different data, that could be a sign that you have a bug. Or you might not get any data at all, which is the most likely scenario. Then the second if condition is, if you notice, I'm using if else. So the second deals with the getting of messages. That's a get request, which is the read only. The first one was update or create, and the second is read only. So it's very basic compared to the first one. We don't need to get any data from request. All we're doing, we're just getting the messages. We're using this method get messages, which we will implement later. It's at the bottom of the file. Now for now, just assume we get the messages in the body, and then we print the body res.end into the response. One key differentiator here is that body.length, we put that header. It's very good to put the length of the body in the header, so browser knows how large this file is. And the last else is when everything else didn't match. So basically it's not a get, it's not a post, it's none of those URLs. I have it just for us, so when we go to the root, when we go to localhost :1337/ without any URLs, then we would not be surprised that our server is not working, right? We would see this message like, hey, you actually need to have some path in your URL. Otherwise, it's not going to work. So finally we have these messages, but luckily they're very small. We have these methods, but luckily they're very small. Get messages, all it does, it basically just stringifies our messages array. If you remember, we defined that array early. It's just in the same scope, so we don't even have any namespacing. We just stringified it and push it back, return it, okay? And then add messages, a little bit more interesting. We actually using query string here. So data comes in the form of the URL encoded string. If you forget what or didn't know what URL encoded, it's something like name equals value, ampersand name2 equals value, ampersand, etc., etc. So we get that string, and we use in parse to get the JavaScript object, which we can push to the messages. Once we do that, we output back that message, again using stringify. And just to show you, the package.json didn't change from the previous example. The proc file is the same. You need those two files in addition to your Node.js files when you deploy to Heroku. But for local setup, we don't need it for now. So now let's go to the terminal. In the terminal, I'm cding into the test folder. Let's see if I have the files. I do. And I want to start with tests. So the tests are not failing. So just to show you that the tests are actually working and it's not a fake test, let me change this. So I'm submitting go1, but I will be expecting go, okay? And remember, every time you make a change and you use Node, you need to kill that process. Okay, so now it's failing, which means our test is working. I'm going back and actually fix it. Now it should pass. Okay, so it's when it's passing, you don't see any errors. And we have our server running. Okay. When you don't need the test, you can start the server with my favorite Node dev. So it's running now. Let's go to the browser and see what messages we have. Okay, so it's localhost :1337/messages/list.json. And as you can see, I have this wonderful JSON viewer which prettifies my output. You would probably see something ugly like this. And this is our message that we have hard-coded. Okay, so now let's use Postman and submit a new message. I already have it saved here. So the message is name is Azat and message is Fullstack FTW. Sending, I get the response, which is exactly the same values that I submitted. Okay, so I can also use Postman. And if you don't know Postman, it's a wonderful Chrome extension, or even it works as a standalone app now. You can submit all kinds of requests and you can save them, and it's a great tool, but it's still not as good as having tests. So now you can see that this message is actually there. So that's what pretty much our test did already, right? So nothing new for us, but it's just another way to test. Why tests are better? Because there are a lot of things that can go wrong in this GUI if you do it manually. So try to avoid manual testing. And the final check, just to show you the subject, it's here, right? So our server works, our message board server works. We can submit a new message, we can get list of messages, and when we submit a new message, we actually see that in our memory store. So the memory store is good, it's fast, but there's one downside. If we restart the server, which I just did, the memory store is gone. This message is hard-coded, but our message that we submitted via post is gone. So that's the downside of memory, so you need some sort of persistence. That's it for this video. I'll see you in the next one.